Welcome back to another episode of Sacred Wild Man. My name is Roy, and today's topic is going to be about the lover archetype in men. Now, much of this is going to be based off the book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. And paired with that, some recent changes and experiences in my life that have inspired me to present on this very topic. So, long story short, for the past 2 years, I've been in a more bitter place, and much of my motivation has come from a sort of very strong no towards the world and the happenings in the world. Much of what I was seeing and sometimes still see, I said, no, this isn't for me. This does not work for me. And I'm choosing to blaze a different path, even if nobody else agrees. Unfortunately, part of that also meant I was putting myself in a pretty bitter place in regards to the world. Also in regards to women, as I was dealing with a lot of this, like you could call it the red pill rage effect. As I was doing some more work around years and years of work that I've been doing in my own personal therapy growth journey of unraveling my relationship with my mother, with women, with men. So all these things kind of coalesced in the last 2 years and resulted in me being in a very bitter and frustrated place. And I was, for the most part, content to stay there because in some ways it felt slightly empowering. I could feed off of this anger and bitterness toward the world. But in other ways, it wasn't helpful. And it wasn't until recently, in the last month or so, or month and a half even, that I started to enter more into a place of opening my heart back up to, I would say, myself first and foremost, and then from myself extending to opening my heart up to the world. And that's where some of these small little changes and experiences started happening without me necessarily even seeking some of them out. But it renewed this sense of enjoyment of life as opposed to, I'm just going to be bitter and everybody is my enemy. So that's where I would like to take today's conversation, is the importance of this lover energy, this heart energy for men. And what I'll do is go through first what the lover is, based off of the description that Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette give, as well as the negative poles or the shadow poles of this lover energy that they describe. And then go into what the integrated, or I guess the highest expression of the lover energy would look like and feel like. And then share some personal examples of people, men that I see, who illustrate this energy well, whether it's just one aspect or, the full range. And then go into some ways that you can begin to, as a man, heal your lover energy if there has this archetype within you, if there's been any wounding to it. And also share some of my experiences recently that have helped in doing so. So to begin, what is the lover archetype? And Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette describe this as the lover is the archetype of play and of display, of healthy embodiment, of being in the world of sensuous pleasure, and in one's own body without shame. Thus, the lover is deeply sensual and sensually aware and sensitive to the physical world in all its splendor. Along with sensitivity to all inner and outer things comes passion. The lover's connectedness is not primarily intellectual. It is through feeling. The man, under the influence of the lover, wants to touch and be touched. He wants to touch everything physically and emotionally, and he wants to be touched by everything. He recognizes no boundaries. He wants to live out the connectedness he feels with the world inside in the context of his powerful feelings, and outside in the context of his relationships with other people. Ultimately, he wants to experience the world of sensual experiences in its totality. The man profoundly in touch with the lover energy experiences his work and the people on the job with him through his aesthetic consciousness. He can read people like a book. He is often excruciatingly sensitive to their shifts in mood and can feel their hidden motives. This can be a very painful experience indeed. The lover is not, then, only the archetype of the joy of life. In his capacity to feel at one with others and with the world, he must also feel their pain. Other people may be able to avoid pain, but the man in touch with the lover must endure it. He feels the painfulness of being alive, both for himself and for others. And on this last piece where they describe how the lover not only feels the joy of life, but also the painfulness of being alive. This is where I think many men, myself included, can start to armor up and even try to destroy and kill our own heart or desires because it just feels too much to bear. And it seems especially common for men who, I guess, growing up more in the 1960s and thereafter, and basing that off of data from the book No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover, where he talks about how, in the 1960s you start having the women's rights movement, and you start to see more of these men who are raised by a single mom, whether that's because the parents split or because dad is always away going to work, in long distances away from the home. So all men have then to base their world off of was mostly the world of women, which can be very rich in emotion and the heart, and lead to these young boys who later grow up into men who are more connected to the emotions, sensitive to the emotions of others, especially women, and you could say more heart-centered. In the modern day, you might describe some of these men as the nice guys, right? Suffering from the nice guy syndrome. Hand goes up there as a recovering nice guy. That's something I'm still working to unravel because the patterns go deep. And this access to the heart, the ability to feel, isn't a bad or wrong thing. But when you get so heavy into it, it can lead into issues relationally with other men and with women. Now going into the shadow poles of the lover. The shadow poles being the more darker aspects of the lover that are split off, not integrated, you could say potentially wounded based on their life experiences. Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette describe them as the addicted lover and then the impotent lover. So first, in terms of the addicted lover, this would be the person who's caught up in the sensual pleasures. It always feels like they're chasing this thing that they can't get, chasing after this illusion. Who's the next woman? What's the next experience? When's the next psychedelic plant ceremony to go to? Because I want to just experience all this interconnectedness. I got the message from the plant medicine. If those of you who might know Alan Watts, if you get once you get the message, hang up the phone. You just go from there. But these are the men who are just like, no, I want to pick up this phone. I want to just feel it again. That would be the addicted lover, which they describe as the primary and most deeply disturbing characteristic of the shadow lover as addict is his lostness. A man possessed by the shadow lover becomes literally lost in an ocean of the senses. The slightest impressions from the outer world are enough to pull him off center. Pulled first one way and then another, he is not the master of his own fate. He becomes victim of his own sensitivity. He becomes enmeshed in the world of sights, sounds, smells, and tactile sensations. This is what the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr talked about as the sin of sensuality. And it's what the Hindus talked about as Maya, the dance of illusion, the intoxicating, addictive dance of sensuous things that enchants and enthralls the mind, catching us up in the cycles of pleasure and pain. What happens when we are caught in the fires of love, roasting in the agony and the ecstasy of our own longings, is that we are unable to disincarnate, to step back, to act. We are unable to detach and gain distance from our feelings. What the addict is seeking, though he doesn't know it, is the ultimate and continuous orgasm, the ultimate and continuous high. What he needed to do was develop his masculine ego structures outside the feminine unconscious. He needed to go back to the hero stage of masculine development and slay the dragon of his over-connectedness with his mortal mother and with Mother, the God All-Mother Mighty. Boundaries, constructed with heroic effort, are what a man possessed by the addict needs most. He doesn't need more oneness with all things. He's already got too much of that. What he needs is distance and detachment. So, for some of you watching, you might be able to relate to this shadow pole of the lover, the one who is always chasing after these experiences and just can't get enough, can't establish any sense of boundaries, but is always caught up in these sensual experiences. Then you have the other side of the pole, which is the impotent lover. And this would be the type of man who is very disconnected from his emotions. They will often have a sort of flat affect, not even necessarily stoic, but it's kind of an emptiness there, and they just don't feel a lot of vividness in their life. There's this dissociated quality, like they're kind of watching their life just a couple steps back behind their eyes. And Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette describe this shadow pole as, we will describe symptoms that psychologists call flattened affect, lack of enthusiasm, lack of vividness, lack of aliveness. We will feel bored and listless. We may have trouble getting up in the morning and trouble going to sleep at night. We may find ourselves speaking in a monotone. We may find ourselves increasingly alienated from our family, our coworkers, and our friends. And let's see, what do I have here? Notes. Yeah, so that is the impotent lover in a nutshell. He's not very turned on for life, and you could say he metaphorically has a flaccid penis because he's a flaccid man in life. There is no hard on, there's no turn on for the life that he lives. And from what I have found in clients that I have worked with and times in my own life, the depression, that flat affect, that lack of vividness and ability to feel in life isn't because these people don't feel. These men actually have a rich interior world of feeling, but most likely, even beyond their knowing, because it's an unconscious thing, is that they can't tolerate that amount of feeling in their nervous system. It feels too much. And usually that dates back to some experiences in their life growing up, whether it was a singular moment of some traumatic experience or complex trauma, right? So that would be more of the relational developmental trauma, death by 1,000 paper cuts type experience, where this was their normal, and so eventually they figured out something on their own, and that probably would have just been to dissociate, right? That's kind of the last ditch effort of survival for an animal is, well, I can't run and I can't fight and attack this thing, because that's usually not what a child thinks to do growing up in their own family, right? My parents love me, they're supposed to love me, and because I don't want to fight or attack them, I also don't want to run away from them, but I also don't feel safe, something is off, well, the only thing I can do is shut down. And when you do that, you shut down your ability to feel into your periphery, right? Your hands, your feet, kind of just cut off from the periphery. These parts, your hands, right? Perhaps your lips, you're not able to contact the world anymore. There's a fear of contact, so you just withdraw in. But in that, there is a rich interior world of feeling. It just feels too much to access. So that's just something I want to put out there, is that, you know, if there aren't any men out there, it's like, yeah, there's something wrong with me. I can't feel. It's not necessarily you can't feel. It might be more accurate to say you're afraid to feel what you would feel if it were to be allowed. And you can't really consciously do that. It's something that will require perhaps work with a professional, or it'll happen when you get triggered in life, right? Something happens, it sets you off. That's an indication of that unconscious material is being tapped into. So with the impotent lover, Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette also talk about how that state of flattened affect, that state of no emotion, inability to connect to emotion, can only go for so long. And then when it reaches a certain boiling point, the other pole, the addict lover, will step in to give the impotent lover a little bit of reprieve, where they write, "At this point, the opposite pole of the archetypal shadow may rescue him by propelling him into the addict's quest for the perfect satisfaction of his sexuality beyond the mundane world of his primary relationship." And I would say this is where you can have certain addictions come in. Sure, you know, the addict lover also has their addictions, but I think those addictions can also equally apply to the impotent lover, especially as these men who don't feel connected to a lot of feeling or richness in their life or ability to enjoy, they're going to go to these addictions for some reprieve, some comfort, usually the self-soothing. So I guess the addictions function for a different purpose. For the addict lover, the addictions might be more to get this high. I want to search for that ultimate infinite orgasm of sensual experience. So I'll keep going to weed, I'll keep going to porn, the next woman to have sex with, the next psychedelic experience. Whereas for the impotent lover, it's more so perhaps functioning as a teddy bear, right? Something to hold on to and find a little bit of comfort, because there is nobody or nothing else to comfort him. So then he'll go to, right, I'll go to weed, right, to sedate. I'll go to porn to feel that bit of release of oxytocin and these pleasure hormones just for a little bit, so I feel better because I feel sad or disconnected. Or I'll go to alcohol, right? Or I'll go to food and eat to fill this sense, this void within myself. So, an example of this impotent lover that actually comes from a different book, what's it here? Bioenergetics by Alexander Lowen. He talks about this man he worked with, Bill. So Bill felt no fear because he had cut off all feeling. And that was also why nothing ever happened emotionally in his life. But at the same time, he was desperate for something that would break down or break open the icy cold, impersonal will enveloping him like a chrysalis. He wanted something to reach his heart, but first the chrysalis would have to be smashed. He was tempted. He had impulses to touch high-tension electric wires and to step in front of speeding cars. He said he would like to jump off a cliff if he could do it safely. He wanted to fall so that, like Humpty Dumpty, his shell would crack, but he was afraid it would mean the end of him. And that was something I underlined when I read, because it made me think of certain clients, and it also made me think of certain moments in my life where it's kind of this almost, it can be scary at moments when you, especially if you fear your own inner psychological landscape. Because some people, in the times when I was at a psych hospital, people would say, I don't know where I came with this thought. This is totally not me. It's freaking me out. And for me, it's like, well, it makes sense why you'd have that thought, right? There's this part of you, if you think of yourself as different fragments, right, that got lost along the way of having these difficult, traumatic experiences or what have you, a part of you always splits off, right, because it feels too unacceptable, too painful. So when you have some of these thoughts that might seem uncharacteristic of you, maybe sometimes it is coming from something, right? People have spoken about experiences of demonic entities, or maybe you're picking up thoughts around other people around you because you're that sensitive. But sometimes it's just an expression of these fragmented parts of you that are saying, hey, I need some attention here. I just need somebody to hear me out. And so when people get these split moments of, I want to do something extreme, even though I seem to be the very opposite, complete opposite of that, it can be a little bit scary to first acknowledge that. But I think those impulses are a reflection of this part of you that's like speaking to the impotent lover. Like, I can't keep living this way. I can't keep living in this cut off manner where I don't feel anything, or I'm scared to feel something, so I keep shutting it down. I can't keep living this way. Like, is this all there is left for me? I need some sense that I'm alive. I'm still alive here. And one of the ways that sense of being cut off from feeling, or that sense of being very armored up against the world, which not necessarily the impotent lover, but maybe more of maybe a different archetype, but needing to guard yourself and armor against the world, right? That armor and some of this intellectual guardedness bullshit, which I call it for myself, that all fell apart some month or more ago when I went to an ecstatic dance, which I have been continuing to go to. I saw this woman, beautiful flowing hair and beautiful body, and the way she was moving and interacting with other people, I was just like, well, I can't stop looking at you, right? I didn't approach her because I was like, I'm so nervous. I can't approach you right now. It's like I'm re-feeling some of that nervous energy right now. So I was just like, I'm just going to sit over here and I'm just going to witness her and enjoy her without like having to have her or make something happen. But after that night, I was just like, holy shit. I mean, her beauty, the feminine depiction, embodiment of beauty, completely blew all my armored bullshit out of the water. It's like, yeah, the world's not going to affect me. I'm going to stand. It's like, I am completely disarmed in her presence, even though I wasn't up close to her. Completely disarmed. But there was such an intensity of feeling aroused within me, which hasn't happened in such a long time, probably because of my own doing, to shut that off or to withdraw and stay isolated. And I think that is an example of when Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette talk about how the lover doesn't come alive through an intellectual understanding, but it comes through a felt experience. That's how he's awakened, right? And nothing does that more than witnessing beauty, whether that's a woman's body, her voice, how she moves, or it's nature. It's a piece of music you hear that moves you. So many different things, but beauty is, I think, what arouses and activates the heart of the lover archetype in men. And it can be intensely painful because there's sort of a special type of pain that happens when a man realizes that he has shut down his heart for so long, wrapped it, armored it, and then to have that completely broken down, to have that completely broken down, he's completely disarmed. And he has to face once again that richness and tenderness of feeling of his heart, of like, I do feel these things. And also have awareness of like, I've done so much to armor around this. And sometimes that realization is too much, and a man can shut down, or he'll try really hard then to kind of double down, like, fuck this. Why should I honor my heart when I've experienced so much heartache and heartbreak in my life? And there's kind of almost a determination to destroy himself, or to project that outwards and to destroy the object of beauty, to soil beauty that he sees outside, whether that's women, whether that's nature, whatever manner of beauty he witnesses that arouses that deep desire, but also that fear of how much he wants. A man can find destructive ways to work with that, whether that's towards himself or towards others in the external. And it's understandable. I think the wound of the impotent lover, at least that I relate to, is there's this sense of, I've been hurt and I've been spurned by love. I have desired so much. There's so much that I want to give and express, and based on certain experiences that I've had, that wasn't responded to favorably. So now, you know what? Screw the world, or screw women, and I'm just going to be in my little safe zone, encased in bitterness. So the video cut off, but I was just ending on how there's the wounded, impotent lover. There's a lot in which he attempts to try to do to protect himself from feeling that pain again, of having this open heart. And a great quote that captures this is from the book The Alchemist by Paul Coelho. And so he writes, "He was so ashamed that he wanted to cry. He had never even wept in front of his own sheep. But the marketplace was empty, and he was far from home, so he wept. He wept because God was unfair, and because this was the way God repaid those who believed in their dreams. When I had my sheep, I was happy, and I made those around me happy. People saw me coming and welcomed me, he thought. But now I'm sad and alone. I'm going to become bitter and distrustful of people because one person betrayed me. I'm going to hate those who have their treasure because I never found mine. And I'm going to hold on to what little I have because I'm too insignificant to conquer the world." And that was, a very relatable passage in the book for me in regards to these past 2 years, but also quite often in my life, I've been in that place of, having trouble being able to enjoy other people's progress and successes because I was so focused on what I couldn't do or failed to do. So there was a sense of, well, screw other people. I'm not going to enjoy what they did because I didn't get to experience that myself. And so there's a lot here of jealousy and envy that the impotent lover can be set up for. And because that also doesn't feel very good, it makes sense why eventually a man can go into just depression and flattened affect. Just, I can't bear feeling any of these things. So those are the two shadow poles of the lover. Now, the integrated lover, the highest expression of it, is spoken about by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette as, if we are appropriately accessing the lover, but keeping our ego structure strong, we feel related, connected, alive, enthusiastic, compassionate, empathic, energized, and romantic about our lives, our goals, our work, and our achievements. It is the lover properly accessed, that gives us a sense of meaning, what we have been calling spirituality. It is the lover who is the source of our longings for a better world for ourselves and others. He it is who is the idealist and the dreamer. He is the one who wants us to have an abundance of good things. The lover keeps the other masculine energies humane, loving, and related to each other, and to the real-life situation of human beings struggling in a difficult world. The king, the warrior, and the magician, as we've suggested, harmonize pretty well with each other. They do so because without the lover, they are all essentially detached from life. They need the lover to energize them, to humanize them, and to give them their ultimate purpose, love. They need the lover to keep them from becoming sadistic. The lover needs them as well. The lover, without boundaries in his chaos of feeling and sensuality, needs the king to define limits for him, to give him structure, to order his chaos so that it can be channeled creatively. Without limits, the lover energy turns negative and destructive. The lover needs the warrior in order to be able to act decisively, in order to detach with the clean cut of the sword from the web of immobilizing sensuality. And the lover needs the magician to help him back off from the ensnaring effect of his emotions, in order to reflect, to get a more objective perspective on things, to disconnect, enough at least to see the big picture and to experience the reality beneath the seeming. And a great example, tying in the earlier quote I had from The Alchemist, is an example of how that boy in that story has a different attitude about his situation. And that's kind of an example of how the king and the warrior and the magician provide counsel for that hurting inner child within. I would say every man has an aspect of that. And so this is how he reframes himself. As he mused about these things, he realized that he had to choose between thinking of himself as a poor victim of a thief and as an adventurer in quest of his treasure. I'm an adventurer looking for treasure, he said to himself. And this is the journey of parenting ourselves. While we can have great examples of the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover within our lives, whether that's people within our own family, extended family, or just the age now of what some have called internet fathers, right? You have your people who you can look to, who display these energies and these qualities that you admire and is a reflection within yourself. Ultimately, you have to do it for yourself. You're not always going to have this person, this male figure next to you in your life, right? Let's say a David Goggins, to access the warrior energy, to get you up off your ass to do something. And you're not always going to have some wise magician or king energy. You might not always have this Jordan Peterson there who's able to provide you some wise counsel as well. You take what they offer, the energy that they embody, and you learn to provide that for yourself, for the full range of who you are, all the textures, all the flavors, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the things that you don't want to touch. You are the one who has to do that for yourself because nobody else is going to do that for you. But you can look to these other examples. And I think a very important thing for the integrated lover is you get to a point where you can welcome and accept the full range of feeling in life. I forgot who first said this, whether it was in a class that I took in grad school or someone wrote it in a book. But essentially, they said you can't selectively numb off certain emotions. You can't say, or I don't want to feel pain, I don't want to feel sadness, I just want to feel happy, and I just want to feel happy. Just by numbing off certain emotions, your capacity to feel those, you actually dampen your ability to feel the other emotions. So the integrated lover is able to feel all of them but not be consumed by them, and also have the resource of the king, the warrior, and the king, warrior, and the magician to provide certain boundaries and a level of detachment to say, hey, I feel all of these things, I can handle it, I'm not going to be completely consumed by it. And even if I am consumed by it, like thrown about in the ocean and the torrents, I'll find a way, right? I'll find my center in the midst of that chaos. And it's ultimately, I think, really hard for any man to kill off his heart, to really kill off his desires, because there's something about the human heart, I don't know what it is, that is just, I don't know, seeks life. And it's going to find a way. Life finds a way. And I like to think of the heart as this sprouting seed. And also another quote from the book Bioenergetics by Alexander Lowen. He kind of talks about how we ultimately are desiring to live more fuller and expressive lives. And that is something that comes from the heart. So he writes, "We cannot change ourselves by an effort of will. That is like trying to pull oneself off the ground by one's bootstraps. The change will occur when one is ready, willing, and able to change. It cannot be forced. It begins with self-acceptance and self-awareness, and, of course, with a desire to change. The fear of changing, however, is momentous. One must learn patience and gain tolerance. This is a body phenomenon. The body gradually develops a tolerance for a more energetic way of life, stronger feelings, and freer and fuller self-expression." And a big part of this being about the body is that it's related to our nervous system. Right? Our nervous system can become more resilient and robust, but that is built through the exposure to tension. Just like a seed, right, has the tension of the earth that is covering it. And that is a necessary ingredient to provide the pressure on all sides for the seed to then sprout up, even against the force of gravity. And so there's something to be said about how our hearts are yearning for living more fully and authentically. And there's potentially a requirement for tension, for heartbreak, for hardships, to be able to squeeze that out of our hearts. Even, as when we're children, we already have that accessible to us. It's just that life will perhaps dull some of those things or harm some of those things. And so we're as adults, I think we're not trying to add more things. We're trying to shed all of that stuff to come back to that heart and be able to create what I agree with Charles Eisenstein says is the more beautiful world that we know is possible, that our hearts know is possible. So now for some examples of the lover energy that I personally really enjoy. I'll post a link to these in the description so you can look at them yourself. But I really like the example of the captain in The Sound of Music, the Von Trapps. In the beginning of the movie, he's this drill sergeant in his family, and disciplining his children, blowing his whistle, very strict. And it's when Maria, I think that's right? Fräulein Maria, she comes into the picture, and she teaches the children to sing. She encourages them to sing, to have fun, to play. And there's a scene, and that's the one that I have in the link, where the captain, he hears his children singing, and then he starts to sing with them. And then later he apologizes to Maria, and he says, I behaved badly. you brought music back into the house. And then is when you begin to see this lover within him reemerges. And it's just beautiful to see. Another example is this Samoan Chief. I first came across him. I don't know, this was years ago. I think I was just like, how to crack open a coconut, because like, if I ever get stranded on a desert island, I need to know this. This is just how guys think. If women are thinking, he's probably thinking about another woman, about cheating on me. Maybe you've seen those memes. It's like, no, he's thinking about some survival scenario. And so I found this Samoan Chief who teaches you how to crack open coconuts. And he embodies it. It's hard to describe in words, right? Because it's about the feeling. He carries this warrior energy and this chieftain to him that you can just feel. It's very palpable. But also the lover as well, right? He's just deep into the feeling. That's as best as I can put it in words. I recommend you check that out and just sense, how do you feel when you watch him, his movements and how he talks. Another example is I don't know if it's a band, but it's called Sleeping at Last. And there's a song called Saturn. Like 2 or 3 years ago, was listening a lot more to Sleeping at Last, because I was very much not 2 or 3 years ago, probably longer than that. But I was going to his music because I wanted to connect to that sadness, because I was feeling sad. And again, the range of the lover is to be able to feel everything. And so Sleeping at Last, I think, does a really good job of expressing the sadness, this sort of bittersweetness of life. And then lastly is Gene Kelly, Singing in the Rain. I love that clip of just him singing in the rain and dancing. Beautiful depiction of that lover energy. And what else do I have here? So that's all the examples that I have that you can check out of things that men or just scenes, things that I think that capture this lover energy. As for how you can heal the lover energy within yourself, I can only share what has personally worked for me, because I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. There was a time where poetry was one way I accessed the lover, to be able to express the depth of feeling. Working with a therapists, healers, coaches, that was a big part of my journey, still is. Going out into nature, very much a big one. And then perhaps the biggest one for me personally has been dancing. I was part of a dance movement therapy group just when I first started my grad program in pursuing my master's in counseling. And as I mentioned earlier, going to the ecstatic dances. That has been a way that I get into my body to express the depth of what I feel when I can't always communicate it in words. And it was through slowly going to these ecstatic dances that more started to open up in my life. I had received some invitations to some other smaller groups. So I was like, wow, all of a sudden, having some more community in my life, when in the last 2+ years, there was a lot less of that. And then pushing against my growth edges at the ecstatic dances. There was no more this sort of victim mentality that I was stuck in relation to myself and how I relate to women. I was like, all right, I'm reframing my attitude, just like the boy and the alchemist did. I'm in search of my treasure. I'm an adventurer. Or as Zan Perion talks about, is I'm a student of life. So I would continue to go to these ecstatic dances, and my first intention was, can I just enjoy myself? Because if I can't enjoy myself, I can barely even bring a woman into my space to enjoy that. And so that was my focus of, all right, let me let go of trying to get a woman into my space, to successfully attract a woman to want to dance with me because I want to dance with her. Let me just enjoy myself and enjoy the music, and then go from there. And it was only in the last 2 times of the 6 times that I've been there, so 2 out of 6, I don't know what percent, 30, a little over 30%. Okay, not a high success rate, but what I'm going for here is progress and being a student, learning. The last 2 times was when I had more of the breakthroughs of I enjoyed myself, and I had other women approach me. Right, one came up and said, "Hey, can I try dancing with you?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." Some women started conversations with me, and that was really refreshing. It's like, wow, I didn't really need to do anything. I was just enjoying myself, and that was magnetizing people around me. And then I experimented then with approaching women to say, "Hey, would you like to dance?" And even though they weren't dances where I'm like, yeah, because part of me is like, I want to go more, I want to go deeper, go a little more sensual in dancing with these women. That wasn't the case. Some of it was kind of a little bit of the awkward, like, yeah, we're just jiving, but it's not super connected necessarily on that, I guess you could say, more sensual animal level. And that's okay. That's still progress from where I was. And it's through these experiences of continuing to go to these ecstatic dances and pushing against my growth edges that there's more of this heart opening, right? I can feel more. And it wasn't easy just to get there, because there were times where I actually took a 2-week break from the ecstatic dances, because the last 3 or so times that I had went, I felt so numb, I felt so sad, and I felt so lonely, and sort of a little bit of, oh, woe is me, during and after. It's like, I just can't approach these women, and I'm afraid to ask them, and but when I see them, they arouse so much desire within me, and I'm feeling all these sensations in my body, and I don't know what to do with them, and so there's that shutdown. That's part of the process. There's a guy named Brian Bajan, who's the founder of the Fearless Man. He does a great job of leading men through these stages of feeling. And he's like, you have to get through the apathy, the sadness, the anger, whatever else is there, in order to get to the higher, emotions of courage, acceptance, peace. You can't just circumvent those things and jump straight up to the good stuff, right? Again, you can't selectively numb. So you have to go through all those things, which is very painful for the men who have this wounded lover archetype, or they've shut down their heart for so long. They've closed themselves off to desire. I have another video you can check out that I've done earlier called Killing Off Desire, the Plight of the Incel and MGTOWer. I think that's what happens for a lot of men, is that they feel spurned by love, they feel spurned by life and the attempts that they've made, but they haven't had enough guidance from male figures in their life, and they've felt consumed or overwhelmed by women in their life. So then they just grow bitter, and they kill off their heart, and they kill off their desire, and they just silo off. In order to reopen to the world, you're going to have to feel all of the things that you shut down. So it's not easy, but I think there's nothing more worth it than that, to reclaim your heart and offer your gift to the world, because nobody else can. And the world desperately needs it, especially in the times that we live in now. And as you heal, it's not that things necessarily get any easier. It's just that your capacity to deal with it increases. You'll feel things more deeply. You'll become more sensitive as you access this lover archetype. Right? You feel the pain, you feel all the goodness, you feel the joy. That doesn't make it any easier, but it does make life more rich. And as you increase your capacity, along with the other archetypes, the king, the warrior, the magician, you'll be able to handle life, as opposed to feeling that you are a victim of life. And is there any other last thing that I have here? yeah, I think the last thing that I've just written is this can tie into healing the wounded lover, is to pay attention to your intuitive nudges. You have these little inklings that you might sense. Just, it almost feels like daydreaming sometimes. But these little sparks of like, it would be nice to do that. I've always wanted to do that. Those are signals, I would say, whispers from your heart of something that you truly want, or to bring and create into the world. And it's coming from the heart center, not from some rational, like, okay, this is practical based on the societal structures we live in. This would be a good thing to do. This is a good investment, right? You're tossing out some of these more, I don't know what you would call it, pragmatic approaches towards life. You're tapping into the heart, things that are more risky. Right? You can't pragmatic your way into a vibrant, sensual, wild relationship with a woman. You just can't do that, right? You're going to have to come from the heart. You're going to have to come from your, what Brian Bajan calls your turn on, right? Down into your groin and your pelvis, as well as the heart. You're not going to be up here to do that. And as you pay attention to these intuitive nudges, there's so much, again, back to the heart as the sprouting seed. I am convinced, just through the feeling and the knowing, not so much I'm theorizing, but through the feeling and the knowing, is that there is such a deep gift. And men, I want you to hear this, there's such a deep gift in your heart that you have to offer to the world. This is the extension and the penetration of your masculine essence into the world. With all that the world has said, especially here in the West, and these messages and this programming about how toxic masculinity and like, there might be some validity to that, but it's gone a completely different direction where it's not about any of that anymore. Men carry such shame about their masculine edge and their masculine core. They've completely lost it. They've disowned it. But that is so much core of the gift that you have to offer to the world. Like, that's your stamp of who I am. And so that's what men have to figure out. That's what I am trying to figure out, is how do we extract this gift, this seed within our heart, and then put it out into the world and bring the beauty that we as men have to offer to a world that desperately needs it, and to women who desperately yearn for it. And women have their own work to do in regards to ways in which they're wounded and ways in which they have disowned their own femininity. Right? So, if anything, if you've gained anything from this video, I think the core aspect would be, men, know that your masculine essence is a gift to the world. And if you have sealed off your heart, if you've killed off your desire, I invite you to reconsider, what is the price of doing that? And if you can access the lover, if that is something that you want, to feel the full breadth and spectrum of life, all the highs and the lows, but also to be moved by beauty again, and to offer the beauty that you have, would that be something that you want? Wouldn't that be worth it to figure out in this lifetime and to offer that to the world? So that's all that I have for this video. Thanks for tuning in for today's video. I'd love to hear, as always, any comments or reflections that you might have about this topic, and I will see you in the next video.